You're listening to Healthcare Now Radio. Stand by for This Just In, the latest in healthcare innovation and technology trends with your HIT advisor, Justin Barnes.
Thank you for joining me today on This Just In Radio. I had an amazing time this year at the HIMSS annual conference as we aired This Just In Radio live from the show floor. Our fourth year in a row, and thankfully, they always get better. Thank you very much to all of my amazing guests that came by to share their time and thought leadership. Many thanks to the show sponsor, Lenovo Health, and certainly many thanks to Roberta Mullins and the Healthcare Now Radio team for producing this show. We've compiled all of the guest interviews to share with you in this broadcast, but look for many more in the coming weeks. You'll also find these interviews on our archive channels. Just check in at thisjustinradio.com. We hope you enjoy these HIMSS 18 recordings as they are all in their true environment with 40,000 healthcare and health IT leaders all around us, as this year we place our studio right in the middle of all the action. And you'll be able to hear the energy and hopefully feel it as well. Enjoy.
So thank you for joining. Dr. Jim Mault, Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President, Qualcomm Life. Thank you very much for joining the show.
My pleasure.
And also thank you very much for joining the think tank this morning.
Oh, it was great. That's a prestigious gathering, and thank you for inviting me.
You got it, my friend. We'll keep you on the list for sure. We actually are going to have about 10 to 15 minutes for this, so we can actually not have to rush too much. We have a little extra time.
Great.
So, first of all, what are the high points from the think tank this morning that you remember you would call out?
Sure. Well, the think tank really is starting to think forward the most important aspects of us being able to advance healthcare from fee-for-service to value. And I think one of the key, it seems obvious, but you really got to call it out and make it clear that value is not possible without access to it.
Oh, perfect. Yep.
Value is not,
came over.
okay. Value is not possible without access to the data.
Right.
And the vivid example was the calling out the experience from the 1990s and telling doctors that you're going to have to change the way you practice medicine with capitated payment.
C word.
And we're going to put all the risk on you,
right?
But you're not going to have access to any of the data you need in order to be able to survive that. I mean, it's untenable.
Right.
And the think tank really this morning, calls this out, and then not only presents the challenge, but here are some of the solutions that are real. And I think the other poignant message, and this is one of my soapboxes, is the reality is there's a lot of obsession and focus on the shiny object.
Right. Very true.
The gadgets and the technology.
And we're sitting here at HIMSS, but there's a lot of them around us right now too.
It is.
But you're right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is where we're at now is we have cool technology. We have the ability to monitor patients, generate digital data. There are some real serious problems right now with data liquidity and being able to, it's inexcusable to be frankly where we are today compared to the 90s. Because the 90s, the data wasn't digital, and today the data is digital, and yet
we're still not sharing.
We're still not
interoperating it.
Yeah. So the reality is these are business issues, they're policy issues, they're the willingness to cooperate and do the right thing.
Yep.
I think, for better or worse, some of those who are making this difficult are going to either do the right thing on their own volition, or they're going to get shamed into it, or they're going to get basically forced into it.
Well, yeah, and so the force was just here, 3 guests ago, was Genevieve Morris, who wrote TEFCA, and they're going to, the government's going to push this further from their perspective.
I had a conversation with her this morning as well. Yeah, I mean, it's time to do the right thing, and unfortunately, if they can't step up and do the right thing, then somebody's going to have to just give them no choice. But people are dying.
Right. That's the bottom line.
And we're spending billions of dollars unnecessarily because of these games with access to the data. Sorry,
I love it. No, you
calling it the way it is.
We think the same way. So what healthcare and or healthcare IT trends are you seeing from your perspective as Chief Medical Officer for Qualcomm?
Yeah, it's an exciting time, and I'm about to say something pretty bold.
Cool, please. Make it bold. And Roberta loves when I'm bold and controversial. I never am, so make it bold, make it controversial.
And frankly, I honestly tell you, with all sincerity, I am not going to be overstating this. What we're about to see over the next 5 years, most definitely 10 years, is going to be a profound moment in healthcare that will be looked back upon 100 years from now and recognized as having the same impact on par with the introduction of anesthesia in the 1850s and antibiotics and immunizations in the turn of the 20th century. This next 10 years is going to be that impactful because of our ability to move from episodic, what I would call uninformed care. And we know it. People, well, again, calling out just the facts, we know right now, just from the Institute of Medicine, at least 400,000 people a year, and many more are dying as a result of our healthcare system. In other words, our healthcare system itself is the instrument of death.
It's killing.
And so when you look at the fact that we have smartphones, we now have smart cars. It's a good analogy, even the commercial airline industry. Each of those, I'll take a few minutes to explain this. Smart cars. Right now, about 33,000 people per year die in a car accident in the United States alone. If you haven't seen it, you're going to be hearing a lot about it. There are now cars that have multiple sensors around the entire perimeter of that car that are monitoring the speed and the trajectory and the position of anything around that car, to the point where it's making instantaneous, simultaneous calculation about the likelihood of crashing into something. And that car now has the ability to recognize a threat and apply the brakes faster than any human being can possibly do that, and stop you from crashing into another car. The Institute for Highway Safety has now published its forecast that by 2022, enough of these cars will be on the road that it will reduce by 1/3 the number of people in the United States that die in a car accident each year, So we got smart cars, and it's all based on sensors and predictive algorithms. Now we look at healthcare, and in the intensive care unit, in the operating room, we now have the ability to plug in to this rich, beautiful streaming data.
Yep.
But we as human beings, sadly, are only capable of digesting and processing so much information at any one time. And in fact, the Institute of Medicine published this in 2007. There's a study of cognitive capacity on the part of healthcare decision making. It turns out that even the brightest human being can assimilate about 7 different sets of data as the basis of making a particular medical decision. In reality, these patients are now generating what amounts to about 1 million pieces of data per hour.
Wow.
And how many of us can actually make sense of that?
Right.
None of us. So what you're about to see is the emergence of an intelligence layer that is going to be able to be applied to this streaming data once we have liquidity, and be able to start to tell the clinicians, the nurses, the anesthesiologists, instead of this patient crashed an hour ago and thank God we rescued them, what you want is to prevent that crash. We don't want the plane crashing.
Right.
We want the autopilot system to be showing the pilot what's on the horizon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in our closing, we have about 2 minutes left or so. What would you say are some of the things? How is Qualcomm Life addressing it from their perspective, these trends and what you're talking about? What are you guys thinking about in your over the next couple of years in your strategy?
So our strategic imperative is really enabling, I would call it the stack that starts with the sensor technology.
Okay.
So we have a lot to do with right now enabling medication injectors and inhalers and wearables and sensors to be able to capture this new rich data. That's starting point.
Yep.
The second layer is being able to connect that data and bring it into the downstream data systems, where the third layer, these predictive analytics, right now the FDA has just sanctioned something called software as a medical device. So this is now a relatively new category. The intelligence layer, the predictive analytics are going to start to digest these streams of information, and we just announced some very vivid examples of that here at HIMSS.
That's excellent. So in our closing 30 seconds or so, how would you tell people, or advice would you share for people to kind of navigate some of these trends that you're seeing? I mean, where do they go to see it, or what can they do to engage it?
Yeah, this is really the new frontier, and the opportunities are abound in every academic medical center. It really is the triangulation of collaboration between the technology vendors, the clinical domain experts, and this new participant called the mathematician. The mathematicians are going to be the ones that help us look at the data that's being generated by these technologies and do the pattern recognition and these new predictive algorithms.
That's fantastic. Dr. Mault, Qualcomm Life, thank you very much for joining the show, and thank you very much for joining the think tank this morning. Great to have you.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it. Thank you
so much.
All right, feedback. Justin Barnes is in the house. How are you, my friend?
First of all, Aneesh Chopra, president of CareJourney, and also former White House CTO. So thank you very much. You always are a great guest, a great friend of the show, so thank you.
And a great friend to you, my man.
Yes, you are, my
Leave
friend.
me out of this? Come on, man.
Always. So thank you again. And so let's go ahead and dive in, because you always are a phenomenal guest, a lot of great ideas. What do you see out there for trends and or innovations that you're beginning to navigate, or you recommend we navigate as an industry?
Well, look, I'm biased, but SEMA's speech really set the tone. I mean, of course, Jared's framing, but SEMA's speech, we are all in on basically empowering consumers with access to their health information. And I would say if there was a thematic across the meetings I've had this week, it is an awakening that perhaps we should start understanding and operationalizing what it would mean to have consumers actually control how their information is shared and used. And that, I think, for the most part, might have been academically aware, but may not have been operationally tested.
Yep.
And the message was unequivocal, we're moving, and people are now discussing, what does it mean for me? How do I better engage my patients? Do I have services they trust to allow me to use that data in a way that can make their care better? And I think that's the discussion that's healthy to have, but long needed.
So you're talking about the Jared Kushner's discussion yesterday?
That's right. So yesterday at HIMSS, Jared Kushner dropped in as a surprise guest, made a commitment on behalf of the whole of government that you were going to work whatever policy levers and convening power they had to make sure consumers have access to the information they need. And thankfully, in modern formats,
started a lot of that.
we as a country. And the great news is SEMA then backed it up with policy. Not only did she say we're launching Blue Button 2.0, which is essentially the operational service for CMS, but she said, I'm going to challenge the health plans that do contracting work with us to support that same measure, including potentially STARS regulation, which means it has a serious impact to the bottom line of the plans that contract with CMS.
Excellent. So what are some big things that you're focused on, either over the last 3 months or the next 3 to 4 months in your life? What do you think?
I wear 3 hats. Mm-hmm. So I would say as a broad policy ecosystem, we need to develop a trust framework for consumer-directed exchange.
Okay.
Assuming a world where patients invoke their rights, have their information flow to where they want to go, today the apps they choose are not regulated by HIPAA. So we either have that weakness in our consumer protection fabric, or we find a way to voluntarily beef up the system. So I'm spending time on that. Mm-hmm. Second, I'm very keen on making sure the engineers are rowing in the right direction for technical standards, fast and furious to get more and more of the electronic health records mapped to the FHIR API standards. And I think that's work that's still got to be done. I'm not the engineer, but I'll be a convener, catalyst, nudger, and the Argonaut project is making tremendous progress, adding clinical notes this year, looking at back-end authorization scopes so you can perform some B2B functions. And then last but not least, in my day job at CareJourney, we want to squeeze as much clinically relevant insight out of the information that ACOs, Medicare ACOs get on behalf of their patients. And that largely comes from the claims data, but as these APIs come to life, it'll allow us to have a consumer-oriented clinical and claims database on which we can help inform primary care doctors and their support systems to better care for the patients that they're accountable for.
So give me. I don't know CareJourney as well. So give me 30 seconds on that.
Well, so the headline is we take the perspective that if this was your mom in the ACO, and my mom and dad both are in an ACO in Florida. What you want to know is if they've given you access to their information, which is essentially what ACOs get on behalf of the beneficiary, what can it tell us about opportunities to improve their care? My mom doesn't remember the wellness visit anniversary date.
Right.
If, God forbid, they get admitted to the hospital, that they may be eligible for a transitional care service so that a primary care doctor can explain their discharge instructions. 1 out of 8 Medicare patients today that are eligible for this service get it.
Right.
So we have a long ways to go. So I could go on and on about a commercial for what we do, but the headline is there are clinically relevant metrics you can derive out of the data that consumers allow you to have on behalf of these ACOs, separate and apart from the traditional, your spend rates are too high, you're using the ED too much. Those are sort of insurance reports, and we think this is really about clinical improvement, and you can use the same data asset for clinical improvement before we solve the interoperability EHR issue.
Fascinating. So talk about some best practices that you might share for the average clinician, even executive here at HIMSS. You have some roundtable. I want you to talk about what you're going to do later on today. Or Bruce, you said you guys have a roundtable.
We do. We have a roundtable in about an hour. What I'll say is, I will say 3 things.
Okay.
If I were a health system CIO, and I see my brother Neil Gomes is in the house from Jefferson, an evangelist for digital health, I would want to have at least one consumer-directed exchange program on my list of things to experiment with, to learn.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Will consumers even trust us if we put an app in front of them, or they're only going to trust Apple Health and not us?
Right.
That's an important. So have a project on the books. My boy in the house has built all of this. Is now laughing because he's like, I did this a year ago. Number 2. If I were a loved one, like a son or a daughter to a Medicare patient,
or a grandson to my 93-year-old grandmother.
Yeah, I would learn about the notion of Blue Button and be aware that over 100 app developers imminently will be convincing me to trust them with my parents' data to help me support them as their caregiver as they get older in life. So I would be mindful as a consumer that the applications are coming. And then to me, the really interesting question is, in boardrooms across the industry, the question is, am I building an organization that is responsible for the doctors and hospitals who treat patients? Or am I going to be a fiduciary on behalf of the consumer to say that if you trust me with your information, I will help you navigate the delivery system, even if it's to the detriment of the institution that sponsored us?
Excellent.
And I think that boardroom discussion needs to happen in this new data liquidity environment where consumers are in control.
Awesome. So give us 30 seconds on your panel, or the roundtable that you're doing in an hour from now.
Well, we're going to do two things. We're going to have sort of a practical, pragmatic session where CIOs, the EHR vendors, and the standards bodies can come together to say, how much of the medical record can we map to FHIR, how fast, and how many different developers can we provide this to? Developers for patients, developers for doctors, developers to care teams and employers and the like. That's a kind of a candid discussion about how fast to move. Anil's laughing. Move faster, move faster. Okay. Third, or I should say later this afternoon, we're having a town hall meeting. Everybody is invited at 5:30. Come to the Developer Interoperability Showcase Theater, where we will have an open town hall meeting so you can learn about what's happening in the Argonaut project, what the technical standards roadmap looks like, what's the Karen Alliance doing for consumer-directed exchange, what is the Smart on FHIR community doing around the new flat FHIR specifications for bulk access over APIs. Not only will you hear what's going on, but you learn about how you can participate. Right. Because all three are open, collaborative, welcoming bodies, because that's how we roll, Justin Barnes.
Love it, brother.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Aneesh. You're always a phenomenal guest, brother. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Have a great rest of the show.
Cheers.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Aneesh Chopra, everybody.
All right.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Neil. Now, you have one of the longer titles. Actually, you win. You have the longest title of my guest, so I actually have to read this.
Yes.
But Neil Gomes, Chief Digital Officer and Senior Vice President for Technology, Innovation, and Consumer Experience, Thomas Jefferson University at Jefferson Health. So thank you very much. Welcome back to the show. Thank you. And also thank you for being a great collaborator here in a think tank. Fantastic. So good. Hopefully, we're going to pull out some of those items today. So let's start off with what you're seeing out in the industry around actionable intelligence. What do you see as some of the trends for trends for healthcare or health IT out there?
So I think a big process-oriented trend is optimization of processes and cost reduction. I think that will stay in place for a very, very long time. It probably should. Another one I wanted to be sure that I got the right point is the kind of work that my teams do, right? Digital innovation, digital transformation. I think healthcare is coming to terms with the fact that digital is a game changer, right? And I know that healthcare has been told this for some time, not specifically digital, but just technology. But with the disruption in other industries, and now that disruption coming home to healthcare, we're starting to realize that there's something here that we need to pay attention to, and that platforms that deliver health, and in our case also education, are very powerful and can bring about a lot of change. So I think that's another big trend. And then finally, the last one, of course, is consumerism. I think that we are starting to see people take that very seriously. 2 years ago, it was defined as a kind of theme in healthcare, but no one paid it real attention because of the value associated with care at the end of it. But now it is becoming a reality, and people are making decisions, like even though scenarios where a patient nowadays will not even say they have insurance, because they want to try and negotiate a better deal as being somebody that's without insurance. Right.
I'm actually paying 80% less in 2018 than I did in 2017 for healthcare.
Wow.
Because I became a consumer in 2017.
Yeah.
Big time consumer.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So how are you addressing? And so, and I know some of the strategies that we've talked about in the past, but how are you addressing specifically those trends? Either for you personally, for your department, or your university?
Yeah, fortunately, I think that our team is in the right place at the right time. But I think that there are lots of other organizations that talk about this, but cannot execute for many reasons, that are endemic to our systems. Right? We are not traditionally, companies like retail. And even they had problems, right, when their industries were being disrupted, hospitality, retail, the airlines industries. But they adapted very, very quickly because it was a do or die kind of thing. In healthcare, it's still not reached that stage, right? Because it's a very human-centric kind of industry or space, but I think. Some people are getting serious, and the only way to really bring about change is to really pay attention to true innovation. The way that Jefferson's doing, for example, I'll just give that as an example. Many other health systems are. They're investing in teams of people, believing that they are not just health systems anymore, but they can be a software company, just like. How's Tesla doing better than, let's say, Ford at this point, right? Because they said, well, we're not just going to be a car company. We're going to be a car company that's also a software development company, right? That's also a hardware development company. And we're going to put it all together in this one value proposition that people are going to love, right? Not just an electric car, but an experience, right? And so I think that's what's happening to healthcare and needs to happen. And some organizations are realizing that and are providing real resources towards it, investing in software developers and designers, and that's where I think the true innovation will come out.
So, from your perspective, how would you recommend the average health system begin to engage some of those best practices? What are 2 or 3 things that they can do, or best practices to follow from your lead?
Well, one is leadership. I think at the highest levels, people in the organization need to believe in this, right? To some, it may seem like taking a plunge, but really it's not. You see value very, very rapidly. And how much of that value you see just depends on how deep a plunge you take. It's quite amazing. When we started out, 3.5 years ago or so at Jefferson with our teams, we had a team of 2. Right now we have nearly 160 people, right, in our group. Yeah. Why is that? Not because you're just creating. It's cool to talk about something. No one makes that type of investment, right? For just the coolness. It's because we return real value, and it's exponential. So as our organization has expanded, also. We've gone from being the 3 hospital system to a 14 hospital system now. That value gets compounded. Over and over. So that's important. And I think, but the most important thing I think is getting your leadership to believe in this.
Right.
And they can start with small investments, see the value, and then they'll believe in it if they don't. We have the luxury of having someone like Dr. Steve Glasgow, our president and CEO, who understands technology well, observes disruption in other industries, and is willing to make that deep plunge, right, into doing things like this. So we are fortunate that way, but I think it can happen even at a small scale and amp up over time. I think that's you really have to start from that leadership standpoint.
Yep. Yeah. That's fantastic. Neil Gomes, thank you very much for joining the show. It makes you a great friend of the show.
All right, thank you.
Thank you again for joining me for this aired recording from HIMSS 18 live in Las Vegas. And please tune in weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific to always hear our latest shows. As always, you can track me on Twitter at HIT Advisor and use the hashtag ThisJustinRadio so we can respond to your comments from the show. If you miss any of this episode or want to hear more, all of my radio shows are posted at thisjustinradio.com as well as on Apple iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Google Play, and TuneIn. Also, check out the new website we've launched at justinbarnes.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a terrific week.